A general stood on a ridge, watching 50,000 enemy soldiers pour across the valley like a dark flood. He had 12,000 men. He had no reinforcements coming. He had been told by his own emperor to hold the line or die trying. He was 25 years old, and within the next 6 hours, he would do something so impossible that historians still argue about whether it actually happened. His name was Belisarius, and the battle he was about to fight would crack open the future of civilization, like a hammer striking glass. The year was 530 AD, the place was Dara, a fortified city on the bleeding edge of the Byzantine Empire. Barely 10 miles from the border of the most powerful enemy the Roman world had ever faced, the Sassanid Persian Empire. Two civilizations, both ancient, both proud, both convinced that the other must be destroyed for the world to continue. But this was not just another border, skirmish between rival empires. This was the hinge, the invisible turning point where everything that would become Europe, the Middle East, and the modern world was balanced on the decisions of one man standing in dust and heat with the wrong number of soldiers. To understand why this battle matters, why it still echoes in your life right now, today, in ways you have never been told, you need to understand what the world looked like in 530 AD, and the world looked like it was ending. The Western Roman Empire had already collapsed. Rome itself had been sacked, looted, and left to rot. The great cities of the West were crumbling. Roads built to last 1,000 years were being swallowed by forests. Libraries were burning. Laws were dissolving. An entire civilization was being erased, and no one seemed able to stop it. In the East, the surviving half of the Roman Empire, what we now call Byzantium, was holding on with bloody fingernails. Its emperor, Justinian, had a vision that most of his advisors considered insane. He wanted to take it all back. Every province, every city, every inch of Roman territory that had been lost. He wanted to reverse the collapse of civilization itself, but Justinian had a problem. Before he could reconquer the West, he had to secure the East, and in the East stood Persia, ancient, sophisticated, relentless Persia, with an army that outnumbered his forces on nearly every front. The Persians had been pushing deeper into Byzantine territory, and their king Cavid smelled weakness. He sent his best general, Perozes, with a force of 50,000 to crush the border city of Dara and open the road to Constantinople. Justinian needed someone to stop them. He chose Belisarius. Not because Belisarius was experienced, he was shockingly young, almost untested in major command. Justinian chose him because every other general had either failed or been afraid. And Belisarius was the only man in the empire who seemed incapable of fear. What would you have done? Standing on that ridge, watching an army 4 times the size of yours approaching, knowing that if you fail, an empire falls and the last light of the classical world goes dark. Would you have stayed? Would you have fought? Or would you have done the rational thing and retreated while you still could? Belisarius did something that no one expected. He did not charge. He did not retreat. He dug a trench, not a simple defensive ditch, a complex system of trenches arranged in a shape that military historians would later describe as revolutionary. The trenches were angled, offset, designed to funnel the enemy into killing zones while allowing his own cavalry to strike from the flanks at exactly the right moment. It was a trap disguised as desperation. The Persians saw the trenches and laughed. Their scouts reported that the Byzantines were so afraid they were hiding in the ground like animals. Perozes, confident and contemptuous, ordered a full assault on the first day. He expected the battle to be over by sunset, that it was not over by sunset. The first Persian cavalry charge slammed into the trench system and shattered like a wave against engineered stone. Horses stumbled. Riders fell. The angles of the trenches broke the momentum of the charge so completely that the Persians found themselves trapped in narrow corridors, attacked from three sides by Byzantine archers who had been positioned with surgical precision. But Perozes was not a fool. He pulled back, regrouped, and adapted. On the second day, he sent his elite Jadin, the so-called Immortals, Persia's most feared warriors, directly at the Byzantiner. The ground shook under their charge. For a moment, the Byzantine line buckled. Men began to break. Panic rippled through the ranks like electricity, and this is where the battle becomes legend. Belisarius had hidden a force of 600 Herulian cavalry, Germanic warriors, who fought with a ferocity that terrified even their own allies in a shallow ravine on the left flank. He had placed them there the night before, hours before the battle began, predicting exactly where the Persians would commit their strongest force. He had seen the future of the battle in his mind and built his response before the first sword was drawn. When the Immortals broke through the center, Belisarius gave the signal. The Herulians erupted from the ravine like a blade from a hidden sheath. They struck the Immortals from the side at full gallop, and in that single moment, the geometry of the entire battle inverted. The hunters became the hunted. The Persians, trapped between the trenches and the Herulian charge, collapsed into chaos. Perozes ordered retreat. But retreat through those angled trenches was nearly impossible. The very terrain that had funneled them in now refused to let them out. Thousands of Persian soldiers were killed not by swords, but by architecture, by the shape of the ground beneath their feet. By the end of the second day, the field belonged to Belisarius. 12,000 had defeated 50,000, a 25-year-old general with a trench. And a hidden cavalry force had broken the most powerful army in the far east, and the consequences of that. Victory would cascade through centuries like dominoes, falling in slow motion, because Dara did not just save a border city. Dara gave Justinian the security he needed to turn west. Within 5 years, Belisarius would cross the Mediterranean and reconquer North Africa from the Vandals. Within 10 years, he would retake Italy, marching into Rome itself, the first Roman general to reclaim the Eternal City in nearly a century. The Justinian Code of Law, which would become the foundation of legal systems across the Western world, was written under the protection that Dara provided. Without Dara, there is no reconquest. Without the reconquest, Riemann law does not survive in its codified form. Without that legal foundation, the entire architecture of Western civilization, its concepts of justice, rights, governance, develops along a completely different path. You are living in a world shaped by a trench dug in the dirt 1,500 years ago, and yet almost no one knows. This battle happened. Ask 100 people on the street to name a battle that changed history, and they will say Waterloo, or D-Day, or Thermopylae. No one says Dara. No one mentions Belisarius. The most consequential military mind since Alexander the Great has been reduced to a footnote in textbooks that most people never open. Why? Why would history forget its own architect? The answer is as dark as the battle was brilliant. Justinian, the emperor whom Belisarius had served with absolute loyalty, grew afraid of him. Not because Belisarius ever threatened a throne, he never did. Justinian grew afraid because the people loved Belisarius more than they loved their emperor. And in the Roman world, popularity was more dangerous than any army. Belisarius was recalled, stripped of command, publicly humiliated, and according to some accounts, blinded and left to beg in the streets of Constantinople. The man who had saved the empire was destroyed by the empire he saved. His name was deliberately diminished in official histories. His victories were attributed to luck or to God's favor rather than to genius. Does that pattern feel familiar? The person who gives everything to a system only to be consumed by it when they become inconvenient. How many times has this story repeated across history, across companies, across families, across your own life. This is what happens when we allow power to define truth. The story of Belisarius was rewritten not because it was inaccurate, but because it was threatening. A young man with nothing but intelligence and courage defeated an empire. That narrative is dangerous to anyone who wants you to believe that power belongs only to those who already hold it. If you have followed this story to this moment, if you feel something stirring, that mixture of admiration and anger, of inspiration and grief, then you already understand what English mindset is truly about. It is not simply about language. It is about the stories that language carries. The truths that survive only when someone refuses to let them be buried. And staying here, pressing that subscribe button, choosing to share this, these are not small acts. They are how forgotten truths find new voices. They are how a general who is erased from memory gets to stand on that ridge one more time. In your mind, 15 centuries after the dust settled, the trenches at Dara have long since filled with earth. The Herulian cavalry exists only in fragments of text. The immortals who charged that morning are nameless bones beneath a Turkish hillside. But the idea, the raw, defiant idea that preparation and intelligence can overcome impossible odds, that has not decayed. That does not decompose. Belisarius did not just win a battle. He proved something that every empire, every system of control, every sea,